And I am the chair of the Arts Committee. And on behalf of the amazing Pi Theta Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, our hardworking Arts Committee, and our esteemed President, Carolyn Wright Hopkins, I welcome you and thank you for joining us this evening. The mission of this committee is to bring awareness to the community of our vast and extraordinary African-American artistic history and how it continues to influence the lives of many around the world. Tonight, we're going to delve into the music genre of opera. Why? Well, why not? Black artists and musicians have not just broken ground and excelled in the areas of pop, R&B, country, and hip hop music. They have also been groundbreaking history-making artists in the fields of opera and classic music. Artists like Lizzo, Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z, Nas, and Migos all have used the influences of symphonic, orchestral music in their compositions. And do you know what artists like Bobby McFerrin, Terrence Blanchard, Drake, and Marian Anderson all have in common? Well, they all grew up listening to music as children. Their exposure to art, music directly inspired their musical journeys and led to their successes as folk, jazz, hip hop, and opera singers and artists. Tonight, we're going to demonstrate to you why the words of opera singer Leontine Price are true. Accomplishments have no color. So just sit back, relax, and learn about our history. Now we will have greetings from our president, Mrs. Carolyn Wright Hopkins.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and good evening, everyone. I bring you greetings on behalf of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, Pi Theta Omega Chapter. We are delighted that you could join us this evening. As many of you know, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is the oldest Black Greek letter organization and was founded by African American college women on the campus of Howard University in 1908. What you may not know, though, is that this year, Pi Theta Omega Chapter is celebrating a very special anniversary, 35 years of sisterhood and service in the Morris County area. We are so pleased that you are joining us for one of our programs during our anniversary year. Our Arts Committee has developed a very unique presentation this evening, one which we believe you will enjoy and leave with the takeaway of a few new and interesting facts. I invite you to sit back, enjoy the presentation. Thank you for joining us this evening. And now I will turn things back over to our arts chair, Ms. Norma Jean Mackey. Thank you so much and enjoy the evening.
Thank you, President Hopkins. Before we proceed with the presentation, let's watch this video.
It's a first for New York's Metropolitan Opera and a first for trumpeter and composer Terrence Blanchard. Sunday morning contributor Hua Shu has their story.
The audience was just lavishing the performers with applause after the step performance. It was like 5 minutes of continuous ovation.
Yes, I know those guys are getting the cramp, man, holding that position for 5 minutes. What a moment. What a moment for people to see themselves. And they've never seen that on the stage at the Met.
The Metropolitan Opera in New York opened its season with a production by jazz trumpeter and composer Terence Blanchard. It's an interpretation of the memoir written by Sunday morning contributor Charles Blow. He describes his anguish growing up in small-town Louisiana in the 1970s and 80s.
What drew you to Charles Blow's story?
It was the notion of being isolated in your own community.
Blanchard, who began playing the trumpet when he was 9, related to the feeling of having a kind of dual existence.
Out in the street hanging with your friends, and then being that kid who has to break away from that and walk to the bus stop with his horn in his hand on a Saturday, you know, wasn't a cool thing to do in my neighborhood.
You translate some of the feelings into music.
You have to allow yourself to be vulnerable. While I was working on it, man, there were many moments in my solitude where I was just in tears.
A boy of peculiar grace.
There once was a boy of peculiar grace. That line gets me every time.
Terence Oliver Blanchard was raised in New Orleans in a home that was filled with opera.
Your father was a huge opera fan. What did opera represent to him?
Sophistication, highest level of art. Whenever there was a masterpiece performance on PBS, he said, "Hey, come here, come here. Listen, listen. See, now that's music. That's music."
Blanchard's passion? Jazz. Today, he's a 6-time Grammy winner and also a 2-time Oscar-nominated film composer. He's been working on movie soundtracks since the late 80s. First, as a trumpeter on films like Do the Right Thing.
How did you and Spike Lee begin working together?
I was just hired as a session player, and I sat down at the piano and started playing. Spike walked by and heard it. He goes, "Man, what's that?" I said, "Oh, it's just something I'm working on." And then he goes, "Can I use that?"
Want to hear this one first or one
Yeah,
before?
let me hear the one before, so I remember this one.
Blanchard has composed the scores for 15 of Spike Lee's movies.
When did you feel like you were a composer?
When we did Malcolm X,
Mm-hmm.
it was the first time that I felt like I was connected emotionally to something that I was writing for film. That film, I knew had to be powerful.
Amateurish.
Amateurish, right.
This ledger book from the early 1900s contains the Met's internal notations about opera submissions.
Uninteresting,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not suitable for the Metropolitan.
It's funny that they take themselves so seriously that he writes out Metropolitan each time.
I know.
You know?
Yeah, thank you.
There's not that much space.
In its 138 years, America's leading opera house and largest performing arts institution had never staged an opera by a black composer.
The arts are supposed to be the things that bring us together, that throw away all of those notions of bigotry and intolerance, right? So it breaks my heart to think that William Grant Still approached the Met and was turned away.
William Grant Still, known as the Dean of African American Composers, submitted 3 operas to the Met over a 20-year span.
In the 20s and 30s, what kind of opportunities existed for William Grant Still?
None. Everything was measured by what happened here
Mm-hmm.
at the Met. This is the place that makes the statement for the rest of the world.
These are all people whose works didn't make it to
Right.
that stage. And
Right.
Mrs. Horatio Parker, Mrs. Frances Thurber,
Right.
Gertrude Old Thomas, William Grant Still, women, African Americans, people wanted to perform here. They saw this as the pinnacle, and the commentary is just so dismissive.
So dismissive.
Do you think there's some racial component to this rejection?
Do you think there's racial component to this? Listen, man, there's misogyny all over this too, with all of these women that were rejected, right?
But this time, it was the Met that reached out to Blanchard.
Called me up and said, "We want to put your opera on at the Met." Because I'm like, did this really just happen? Then all of a sudden, boom, and it blows up and takes off like a runaway freight train.
So
Performances of his opera quickly sold out.
And that should be a big lesson to arts organizations around the country. It's time. It's time for us to move on. You know, nobody loves classics more than me. Listen, I'm a jazz musician who loves Bird, John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, but I'm not trying to be them. I'm trying to find the sound for my generation.
In reviews, the production has been praised as being unlike any other opera. For Terence Blanchard, it was an opportunity to take risks.
I haven't been to the opera since, a third grade field trip.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And there were times when my ears would catch up to what was going on. Like,
Yeah.
wait, did they just sing a profanity?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's not like we're trying to be profane for the sake of being profane. Just kind of ramp the energy up.
Now that you've caught the opera bug, are you working on another one?
Well, that's the thing. The night of the gala, man, on behalf of the Met, we like to commission Terence to write another opera for us. I was like, whoa, okay. I want to get a nap in between if I could.
You're on mute.
That was a wonderful video, and I'm sure everybody was surprised that you were going to see this. I could do commentary, but I'm going to leave it to the professional, an opera professional who is our guest tonight, not only to give commentary on this beautiful opera, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, but also to tell us what is opera. This is Miss Allison Scott Williams, is an arts education leader with a commitment to recognizing and cultivating talent in emerging artists. She is currently the president for a studio in a school located in New York City. Ms. Scott Williams holds a Master of Science in Higher Education and Administration from Baruch College, Master of Music and Voice Performance from the Manhattan School of Music, and Master of Arts in Opera Theater and Bachelor of Music and Voice Performance from Oberlin Conservatory. Ms. Williams, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Norma, and I'm honored to be here. Thank you for having me. I just want to take a couple of minutes to unpack a couple of details that were in that prior CBS piece that you may not have been able to catch. And one of them is really about the opera. I mean, the piece was a lot about Terence Blanchard, but I'm going to just say a couple words of why this was such an exceptional, groundbreaking, world premiere opportunity for us as African Americans, for Terence Blanchard, for everyone that was on the stage. And so, as they said, in the 138th year history of the Metropolitan Opera, there's never been an opera commissioned by an African-American composer. And what that means is the Met has never asked, out of all the premieres, all the times they've asked composers, can you please write an opera? They've never asked a Black person. That's really what that means. And when he talks about William Grant Still, who was an African-American composer who basically put into notation form every spiritual that was available at the time. William Grant Still was the one who made the choral arrangements. He's the one who made the solo arrangements. He really documented our history of spirituals. And he approached the Met 3 times with 3 different operas. And to this day, I have never seen them having been produced. So it just tells you the amount of bigotry and racism that was really involved in this form, and that still actually exists today in the new Jim Crow, as I will call it. I also want to be able to just tell you why this is so important in our history and also in the career of Terence Blanchard. You know, opera is the 400-year-old art form that is in multiple languages and has all of this history connected to it. And it really is a mirror or a representation of current life and a dramatization of life. And what we see for the first time is Charles, the main character. We see him going to college and pledging a fraternity. And for that to be documented in the history of the canon of opera, it really is sharing something that's a very intimate experience, basically with the world, because the next time this production gets done, they will have this part within this, and this will go on in history, you know, every time this work is performed. So that's a real statement, if you really think about it, that the presence of a fraternity is written into the annals of opera and of music in that way. In the same way, it's historic to have like Kamala Harris as a member of AKA. It's that same kind of parallel history. So that representation is so important. So I just wanted to emphasize that, because those are some of the things not talked about in the piece. But let me be really to the point and tell you, what is opera? So it is this 400-year-old art form that really covers music, dance, theater. There's costuming, there's lighting, there's special effects, all together in one. And it has the goal of telling a dramatic story. So what comes to mind when you think about this is, well, what's the difference between opera and musical theater? I mean, musical theater tells a story and there's singing involved. Here are the differences. First of all, musical theater is predominantly in English. Opera is in Italian, German, Russian, French, and also in English and many other languages. And so you don't find musical theater pieces are usually composed in English and then they're translated into other languages, whereas opera is written in the language that, you know, the composer intended. The other difference is that in musical theater, there's dialogue in between the songs. So there's a song, you know, think about Dreamgirls. You hear the song and I'm telling you I'm not going. Well, before that song comes on, you know, Effie talks about how she's been fighting and, you know, I want my relationship with you. And there's a whole dialogue that happens before she sings that song. And if you think about other musical theater moments of times you've gone to the musical theater, there's always some dialogue right before. Well, in opera, all of that is sung. Everything is sung from the minute the first note is played by the orchestra. Everything is sung. There's no stopping and talking in opera. Everything is sung, which is why it has super titles. And so the great thing about opera these days is that everywhere you go to see it, there's going to be a screen either in the seat in front of you or on the top of the stage that translates everything that you're seeing. I'm also going to talk to you about voice types, because musical theater doesn't have the kind of voice types that opera has. Opera has sopranos, which soprano is always the heroine. She's the center of the opera. Everything is centered around her problem. The mezzo-soprano is either her mother or her sister, or she's a mean person. So, you know, the mezzo-soprano is the second highest female voice. Marian Anderson, for example, was a mezzo-soprano. The tenor is always the love interest. So the soprano is always meant to marry the tenor. And so he is always, you know, counter to the soprano, and the bass or the baritone in the bass is always the father or the brother or some commanding figure who is telling the soprano what she can and cannot have. So there's this typecasting that goes on in opera. And when you get the opportunity to see Fire Shut Up in My Bones, even if you look at videos, none of this typecasting exists in that opera, which is also another thing that makes it exceptional. So I'm going to go to the next slide and just really conclude this by sharing how, again, opera is the music, the singing, the acting, dancing, the costumes and special effects. 400-year-old legacy, musical theater legacy is not 400 years old. And opera, you sing from the minute it starts till the end, but in musical theater, there'll be dialogue and chatting and things in between the songs that happen. So I look forward to us learning more about the opera singers we're going to hear this evening, because each of them has contributed to our legacy of African-American opera and African-Americans in opera in ways that can really afford the opportunity for the Met to finally commission a work by a Black composer. Thank you.
Good evening. I will start with introducing our first Black opera singer, Ms. Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield. Soprano Elizabeth, she was a former slave. She sang songs that American music critics considered reserved for white artists because it was thought that Blacks lacked the depth to perform. Soprano Elizabeth challenged the United States music scene and racist stereotypes when she embarked on a national tour in 1851, causing her to be known as the country's first Black pop star. In 1853, she sang at the Metropolitan Hall in New York City, and she impressed the audience with her range and vocal power. While on her European tour, she was the first person to sing at Buckingham Palace in 1854. She paved the way for a host of Black female concert singers, from Ciceretta Jones to Audra McDonald. And also, she was the first successful Black-owned record company, Black Swan Records, was named in her honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Winkler. Our next presenter is Ms. Joy Paisley.
Yes, good evening. So our next person is Ciceretta Jones. Ciceretta Jones forged an unconventional path to singing opera, becoming the first African-American woman to headline a concert on the main stage of Carnegie Hall in 1893. She sang at the White House, toured the nation and the world, and sang at Madison Square Garden. There were color lines Ciceretta never managed to break, like the one that kept the nation's major opera companies segregated, denying her the chance to perform in fully staged operas. She shattered racial barriers in classical music long before Marian Anderson sang at the Metropolitan Opera. After honing her skills by studying in Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston, Massachusetts, she appeared in concerts in New York, New England, Philadelphia, the Caribbean, and South America. On a tour in England, she performed for the Prince of Wales, as well as performed at the White House in 1892 for President Benjamin Harrison. Jones was perhaps the most famous of an early generation of African-American singers who shattered racial barriers in classic music. Now, let's listen to her show-stopping voice on the next slide.
her voice. There were very few African Americans who recorded at that time, but we have many descriptions of her voice from the press, how powerful it was and the emotion and the sympathy that you could hear when she sang.
Madison Square Garden was really the big turning point in her life. This prima donna with her beautiful silk gowns, her hair coiffed, the long gloves, and the medals across her chest to say in her subtle way, yes, I have accomplished this.
I woke up famous after singing at the garden and didn't know it. Singing to me is what sunshine is to flowers. I give out melody because God filled my soul with it.
Jones was born Matilda Ciceretta Joyner in 1868 in Portsmouth, Virginia, just after the end of the Civil War. Her parents were devout Methodists. Her father, a pastor, had been born into slavery.
In 1876, the family moved to Providence, Rhode Island, where her father had been offered a ministerial position. They went north looking for a better life than in the South.
Jones began singing in the church choir at an early age.
After singing a solo at a Sunday school concert, some people said to my mother, the child sang a high C. You should let her learn music.
Maybe it was a benefactor at the church who got the money together. She went to the Providence Academy of Music and got some vocal training.
She married a hotel porter in 1883 at age 15 and had a daughter who died as a baby. In 1886, Jones pursued additional vocal training in Boston. She began touring music halls throughout the Northeast to great acclaim, and was hired by a white manager as the lead vocalist of the Tennessee Jubilee Singers, performing arias, gospel, and popular tunes.
She'll be limited to concert appearances because there isn't any opportunity for her to sing in opera. Opera companies weren't hiring African-American singers, and most white American musicians were not going to appear on the same stage with Ciceretta.
In 1888 and 1890, Jones and the troupe toured throughout the Caribbean to packed, racially mixed concert halls. The second tour was managed by an all-black team, including her husband.
That's where she was given the title of the greatest singer of her generation. And she was given all of these medals and precious jewels.
And the more she acquired, the more she pinned on her chest.
Jones soon became known as the Black Patti, a comparison to Italian opera star Adelina Patti.
Opera was a European art form, and so her manager decided this was the way we were going to promote her. And unfortunately, it stuck throughout her entire career.
It rather annoys me to be called the Black Patti. But I have a voice, and I am striving to win the favor of the public by honest merit and hard work.
To be so gifted in these times as a Black person, I can imagine was one of the most frustrating things, because she couldn't just be Ciceretta Jones. She had to be the Black Patti, which was demeaning. My name is Janae Bridges, and I'm a mezzo-soprano opera singer. Recently, I made my Metropolitan Opera debut, singing Queen Nefertiti in Akhenaten by Philip Glass. The first time that I walked onto the stage, I think my heart skipped a beat, maybe 3, but it really felt like I was home. I like to call myself an opera athlete. We are our instruments. As an opera singer, we're unamplified. And so singing for these 4,000-seat opera houses, you have to literally sing from your toes to your head. And it takes great strength.
In 1892, Jones sang at the White House for President Benjamin Harrison and reportedly performed for 3 other U.S. presidents. The following year, she became the first African-American woman to headline a concert on the main stage at Carnegie Hall, slated on the same program as noted abolitionist Frederick Douglass.
One of the highest honors I've received is being invited to perform at Carnegie Hall. In 2018, I made my solo recital debut, and to think that she had stood on that stage in the hardest of times in America really kind of brought it full circle to me. It almost felt like she gave me her blessing.
After touring Europe, where she performed for emperors, kings, and princes, the tide of Jones's career turned. The U.S. Supreme Court's 1896 Plessy v. Ferguson ruling ushered in a new era of segregation and racial violence.
Even having sung for 4 presidents, racism at that point with the Jim Crow laws made it 10 times more difficult for her to succeed.
They tell me that my color is against me, but I am proud of what I am.
At a time when minstrel shows performed in blackface stereotyped and demeaned Black culture, Jones became the star of the Black Patty Troubadours, a popular vaudeville show made up of 50 African-American acrobats, comedians, dancers, and trained singers.
For the next 19 years, she was on the road. They would travel by rail, and they would go from one city to the next, 42 to 45 weeks a year, 5 or 6 cities in a week.
She faced extreme discrimination, unable to stay in hotels. So they had to eventually get their own train car, so she would sleep in her train car.
Segregation not only affected how the Black Patty Troubadours traveled, but also how audiences saw the show.
The white audiences, of course, sat in the orchestra, and the Black audience sat upstairs. And there weren't that many white audience members, but they would not allow the Blacks to come and sit in those chairs.
Why, putting the colored people off in the gallery and leaving all those vacant seats downstairs. I think people of my race ought not to be shut out this way.
Opera houses for the longest time have pretty much looked like one thing, and that is older white people. I have seen people look down on African Americans in this field because they might think that this isn't our art form. And it's just not true. Opera is for everybody, and it should represent our community. It should represent America.
Jones retired from the stage in 1915 to care for her aging mother in Providence. Despite being the highest paid African-American performer of her time, Jones had to sell her medals and properties to survive until her death in 1933. Benefactors and fans raised money to place a headstone on her grave in 2018.
I'm completely convinced that without Madame Ciceretta Jones, there would be no Marian Anderson. There would be no Leontine Price. There would be no Jessie Norman. There would be no me. She not only changed the opera world, but she changed history. What a queen.
We come through the furnaces of affliction and persecution and become as gold tried in the fire. As the crushed rose emits the sweetest perfume, so the Negro, bruised and beaten, sings the sweetest songs.
Next presenter is Miss Shakira Riley.
Good evening, everyone. Our next person in history is our very own Jules Lorenzo Cobb Bledsoe, who was born 1898 in Waco, Texas, and died July 14, 1943. Jules Bledsoe was a baritone and one of the first African-American artists to gain regular employment on Broadway. He studied medicine at Columbia University, and while there, he studied voice. On April 20th, 1924, he made his professional music debut in Aeolian Hall in New York City. For years to come, Bledsoe became an internationally renowned performer known for his ability to sing in several languages and his take on Showboat's Old Man River. Now let's listen to his baritone voice on the next slide.
Jules Bledsoe, born in Waco in 1898, was one of the first African-American opera stars to perform in the United States. He also toured in Europe and recorded for Decca Records.
And what did I see? Coming for me on, woman of angels, coming after me.
Bledsoe himself composed songs and operas and wrote poetry as well. His letters, papers, and music, along with the numerous photographs, are held by the Texas Collection.
But don't say nothing, he just keep rolling, he keeps on.
In 1926, Jerome Kern and Oscar Hammerstein wrote Old Man River specifically for Jules Bledsoe, who played the role of Joe in Showboat and made the song an American favorite.
Our next artist is Katerina Jarborough. She was born July 24th, 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina, and died August 13th in 1986. 22 years before Marian Anderson gave her legendary 1933 debut at the Metropolitan Opera, Katerina Jarborough became the first female Black opera singer to perform with a major white company in the United States, when she played the title role of Verdi's Aida at the New York Hippodrome on July 22nd, 1933. She grew up in North Carolina and moved to Brooklyn, New York as a teen with her parents, a Black father and a Native American mother. After her successful performance in Aida, the New York Metropolitan Association invited Katerina to become a member, but her membership was revoked when they discovered she was not Italian, but a Black Indian. As her career flourished later in life, the association offered her membership again, but she declined. Soprano Jarborough performed throughout Europe in Carnegie Hall in New York City. She retired from singing in 1955 and was honored by her hometown in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1975 with a star on the city's Walk of Fame in 1999 in her memory. Now let's listen to her moving soprano voice on the next slide.
Ms. Shakira Riley will now introduce us to Camilla Williams.
Yes, Camellia Williams, born October 18th, 1919, died January 29th, 2012. In 1946, Camellia Williams made her debut as the title role in the New York City Opera's performance of Puccini's Madama Butterfly. In 1901, professor of voice instruction at Indiana's University's prestigious voice department until 1997. Now let's listen to her moving voice on the next slide.
Our next opera artist that we will be discussing is Robert Keith McFerrin Sr. He was born March 19th, 1921, and passed November 24th in 2006. He was an American operatic baritone and the first African American to sing at the Metropolitan Opera in New York City. His voice was described by critic Albert Goldberg in the Los Angeles Times as, quote, a baritone of beautiful quality, even in all registers, and with a top that partakes of something of a tenor's ringing brilliance, end quote. He was the father of Grammy Award-winning vocalist Robert McFerrin Jr., better known as Bobby McFerrin. In 1949, he performed as Amonasra in Aida with the National Negro Opera Company and made his New York City opera debut singing as the role of Papa Loai, a voodoo doctor, in the premiere of William Grant Still's Haitian opera, Troubled Island. And now we will listen to his magnificent voice in the following audio file.
Let us break bread together on our knees. Let us break bread together on our knees. When I fall on my knees, with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Let us drink wine together on our knees. Let us drink wine together on our knees. When I fall on my knees, with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy on me. Let us praise God together on our knees. Let us praise God together on our knees. When I fall on my knees, with my face to the rising sun, oh Lord, have mercy if you please.
Our next artist we will be discussing is Mary Cardwell. She was born in 1894 and died in 1962. Mary Cardwell was born in 1894 in Madison, North Carolina. In 1901, at age 7, she moved north with her family to Munhall, Pennsylvania. Her father found work at the Hobson and Walker Brickyard and Homestead. Mary learned to sing in the choir of her church. She enrolled in the New England Conservatory of Music as the only African American in her class, and was able to put herself through school with a job cleaning a dentist's office. She graduated at age 31 in 1925 with degrees in voice and piano. Aspiring to be an opera singer, she continued her studies at the Chicago Musical College and in New York. The National Negro Opera Company. Realizing that there were no opportunities for African-American opera singers, she returned home to Pittsburgh in 1927 with her new husband, Walter Dawson. In 1927, Dawson opened the Cardwell-Dawson School of Music in the Homewood neighborhood of Pittsburgh, which remained open until 1941, and Dawson also organized the Cardwell-Dawson Choir. After presenting the opera Aida at the National Association of Negro Musicians Convention of 1941, Dawson launched her National Negro Opera Company that later that same year with a performance at Pittsburgh's Syria Mosque. Dawson was devoted to bringing opera to African-American audiences. She organized opera guilds in Baltimore, Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Washington, D.C., Newark, and New York. She trained hundreds of African-American youth to sing opera. Now let us learn more about Miss Caldwell and the National Negro Opera House.
It was like Cab Calloway,
Roberto Clemente, Lena Horne, Ahmad Jamal,
Sarah Vaughan. She would come into Pittsburgh. She would stay there. If the walls of that house could talk,
Oh, they would talk all day long.
Oh boy. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? Now that would be wonderful.
Barbara Lee lives in a nursing home now and needs oxygen around the clock.
My nephew is doing.
In her wheelchair, she passes the rooms of others, where inside, memories are fading, but not Barbara's, especially her memories of a place just a few miles away, 7101 Apple Street.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. We had a glorious time in that house. It was gorgeous. Stained glass windows.
But those windows were broken or stolen long ago.
And up on the third floor was the ballroom, dancing.
And all signs of life are long gone.
It was quite a showpiece. And it could be again.
Barbara Lee hopes so. She has a special connection to this grand old Victorian, which sits on the border of Pittsburgh's Homewood and Lincoln-Leamington neighborhoods. Many Pittsburghers don't know it, but the National Negro Opera Company started in this house. Even fewer know the story of the woman who founded it, Barbara's aunt, Mary Cardwell Dawson.
I was at Mary's secretary, her confidant. I traveled with her.
And it was quite a journey for Mary Cardwell Dawson during an era when few African Americans had access to opera and classical music training. This woman would teach and inspire generations.
Oh, Aunt Mary was delightful. She was quite a musician. She could do it all.
Mary Cardwell was raised in Munhall, but had to leave the Pittsburgh area to further her dream of a musical education.
She couldn't get into Pitt, so she had to go to New England to get into a university.
By 1925, Mary had degrees in piano and voice from the New England Conservatory. She later studied in Chicago, New York, and hoped for a career in opera.
She was a singer, an impresario.
But America wasn't ready for a black opera singer. Mary would have to pass her dream down to others.
She used to say all the time, the richest child is poor without a musical education.
So Mary Cardwell Dawson taught. Her School of Music boasted an impressive faculty and trained hundreds of young African Americans, first on Frankstown Avenue, then later Apple Street. Students came from all over Western Pennsylvania to learn from Madame Dawson. She stood barely 5 feet tall in high heels, but had a bigger-than-life reputation.
Oh, tough. She was a hard taskmaster. That everybody would tell you that. She got her results.
In the 1930s, she formed the Cardwell Dawson Choir, getting rave reviews wherever they performed.
The critics, they loved her. If Mary Cardwell Dawson sent out a choir, it was a choir.
Along with the awards came a prestigious invitation to perform at the 1939 New York World's Fair, and she was elected president of the National Association of Negro Musicians.
Her reputation was all over the country, you see.
Talented, smart, and charming, Mary spent years networking, holding fundraisers, selling tickets. Her devoted husband, Walter, pitched in too. His salary as a master electrician and Mary's drive kept the music going. In 1941, Madame Mary Cardwell Dawson took that music to a new level. She founded the National Negro Opera Company, opening new doors behind this third-floor window in Pittsburgh.
Many of her students went on to really do fine things, you know. Ahmed Jamal. Now, he was one of Mary's pupils. Bobby McFerrin, he was the first black male to sing at the Metropolitan Opera House.
Madame Dawson worked with pioneering soprano La Julia Ray, who was the National Negro Opera Company's first Aida. Mary mentored Napoleon Reed, a former stockyard worker who later went on to Broadway. The opera company expanded with chapters in Chicago, New York, and Washington. Here's a photo of Mary with Richard Nixon in 1955. This is a check to the opera company signed by Eleanor Roosevelt. And as Mary's national reputation grew, the house on Apple Street remained a beacon in the black community of Pittsburgh.
Anything that was going on for the community, it kicked off there.
There would be some great deals, great business deals done there. The entertainment there was first class.
John Brewer is a Pittsburgh historian now piecing together the legacy of this old house. And it's a legacy dating back to 1894. The first owner on record, George Schaefer. Much more, though, is known from 1930 on, when William Woogie Harris bought the house. Harris would partner with another well-connected businessman, Gus Greenlee, using the home to host high society. And with the famous or infamous always coming and going, the house earned the nickname Mystery Manor.
It was a mystery. It was an enigma to many people who lived in that area. It's seated up rather high, so therefore you get the feeling of royalty when you walk around that house.
Harris and Greenlee were like royalty in the community, and they kept the house humming with social events, benefits, and parties.
Woogie Harris and Gus Greenlee were in fact the bank of the black community. I guess the proper word would be digitarians. Woogie Harris was in fact a numbers man, as was Gus Greenlee. They were the driving force behind the clubs. They were the driving force behind the Negro baseball teams.
Greenlee's wife, Mamie, opened a top-shelf tea room in the house, and Mystery Manor welcomed people who weren't welcome elsewhere.
The hotels were segregated. There were always very prominent people coming in town.
People like Lena Horne, Joe Louis, and Roberto Clemente.
The house became a refuge for African-American artists and for professionals who were not able to get accommodations at the hotels. There's no other place in this Homewood Prussian district that has that kind of richness, that kind of history.
As I was just driving by one day, I saw the plaque, got out of my car, read the plaque, and I was amazed that something like this was in Pittsburgh.
But by now, the surrounding neighborhood was not what it once was. On Apple Street, owners had come and gone. The house was empty when Janae Solomon bought it from the bank in 2000, along with a friend, Miriam White. They paid $18,000 with hopes of raising more money to reopen as a community center with another music school and tea room.
Starting a nonprofit, running a nonprofit, and it's a huge task. It's a lot bigger than I thought it was.
Among the challenges, potential investors had little or no knowledge of the history here. Previous owners had sectioned the house into apartments, removed the grand staircase, sold most of the original fixtures. With no money for improvements, high hopes have turned into frustration.
It's even been suggested that we tear it down and rebuild.
A huge loss for Pittsburgh, a huge loss.
I never think that thought. I always think of what can we do to keep this house standing? And it's still here, so it's still possible.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful presentation of all of these operatic trailblazers. And it's also good to know our history. We have a slide here with our opera reference sources that we use, and I'm going to let us just stay up a couple of minutes because you may want to jot down some of this information. It's a shame that, you know, we don't have more history presented to us about our contribution, and I'm saying our because it's a Black culture, our contribution to this wonderful, wonderful genre of music. Thank you. Now we will go to the next slide. Ms. Winkler?
Yes, thank you. I hope everyone enjoyed such a rich and grateful evening, such good information shared. And who knew all of that history? I hope that you can join us in January. If we could move forward with the slide, we will have Miss Allison Scott Williams come back, and she will do an entire workshop on the 4 African-American operas. Tremonisha by Scott Joplin, Porgy and Bess by George Gershwin, X by Anthony Davis, and we will go into further detail with Fire Shut Up in My Bones by Terrence Blanchard. I think we all should take ourselves off of mute and give Miss Allison Scott Williams a round of applause, as well as the entire committee for such a beautiful evening.
Yes.
Bravo.
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 Thank
Next
you.
slide. And I want to say, saying thank you is just not enough. This group of women, committed women, have been absolutely outstanding. They work hard. They don't mind long hours because we talk at 1 o'clock in the morning or we're sending out texts or emails, but I want to thank them and recognize them. Sandarelle Brown, Julianne Hargrove, Carolyn Cookie Mason, Candace Moore, Shakira Riley, and Miss Darlene Winkler. Thank you, ladies, for your wonderful spirit and your continued commitment to Target 4. Thank you. And again, I applaud you. I applaud you. I applaud you. Bravo. Bravo. Next slide, please.
Good evening,
Ms.
all.
Riley?
Yes. Good evening, all. I just want to say thank you all for participating in our program. And we invite your feedback. So below, we have a survey that is also going to be placed into the chat. So please give us your feedback. Let us know how much you enjoyed the show, things that you would like to see moving forward. It's short and it's sweet. Please just take a few moments to click on the link. It is up in the chat. And again, I just want to say thank you for giving us your time this evening. Back to you, Ms. Norma G.
Thank you. The next slide, please. I'd like to now ask that our program committee chairman, Mrs. Reba Blake, please provide us with closing remarks.
Sure. I just want to start out with saying bravo, bravo. We are so elated that you joined us this evening for this amazing history program on Black opera. The arts is a key program for Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and it falls under our Target 4 initiative, where we celebrate and salute the Harlem Renaissance and Black arts movement. I want to thank Mrs. Allison Scott Williams for her great presentation today. And I would like to thank our wonderful program chairman, Ms. Norma Mackey, and her awesome committee for putting on this program today. We hope you enjoyed what was shared today, and we will provide information and flyers and links for you for the next workshop series in January. Once again, we truly appreciate you and your continued support of our programs. Have a good evening and happy holidays.
Thank you.
And I would like to follow up by saying thank you so very much for your attendance tonight. Thank you for your chat words of approval. And again, Ms. Williams, thank you so very much for sharing your knowledge and your talent with us this evening. We look forward to your next presentation. And as our program chairman said, happy holidays to all, be safe, and thank you. Thank you again, Target4. Thank you thank you, Madam President of the chapter, for allowing us to present. Thank you and God bless. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you for the hashtag.